What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode number 68 of the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast. Brought to you as always by RUDIS, of course. Matt, what's going on in Ohio today?
Ben, what's happening? Well, just
Uh,
trying to get ready for a bunch of stuff. We got a bunch of stuff. We were down at Disney Duels last week, so that's the first time we were at that event. You guys never take anybody down there, do you?
we've never went. Sometimes when I get frustrated with the freestyle Greco system here in Wisconsin, I think about going, but we've never pulled the trigger on it.
Yeah, so we
So
are.
we don't really do any of those summer folk style things. The NHSTA is a big one. We don't do that. So we're kind of once we hit spring, we're geared up for
Gotcha.
freestyle.
Yeah, so that was our first time doing Disney. So we just got back from Disney yesterday, and then we're gearing up.
So did you personally go to
No,
Disney?
no. So our event team,
Okay,
which are the head of our events is Sean Skinner, and he does a amazing
got
job.
it.
So he was running the show down there, and so we got a quick
Okay,
turnaround, getting ready for Fargo. So just prepping for that, getting
mm,
ready to take over Fargo again.
nice. Love it. I
Yeah.
love it. Okay, well, Matt, the topic we're going to cover today, it's an interesting one, and I think we needed to debate criteria just right off the bat because you and I just kind of we came up with it, and then we didn't really we left it open ended, and we do this sometimes. But I always think it's kind of fun to see what we both discuss. So we want to do an RTC power rankings. So I guess I'll just say from my perspective, first and foremost, it was kind of challenging figuring out who trains where. For some people it's evident, obviously, but for others it's not clearly listed. If you go to say to the USA Wrestling rankings, it's not clearly listed exactly where everyone trains. Some people just say have Titan Mercury, but obviously they don't have a training facility, or say Sunkist Kids or NYC, and those are not training facilities. Those are a club that sponsors them, usually pays for their travel and training and other stuff. So that was challenging for me to figure out where everyone is. And then the second thing, I guess I'm gonna go three things. Number two was, do we count the international people? Because obviously now someone like a Michigan RTC, um, they got Stevan Micic is actually in the finals of the European Games. They got Miles Amin, Malik Amin wrestling for San Marino. They got Dave Habit wrestling for Slovakia or Slovenia. So do we count the international guys, which we can discuss? And then number three, that I was thinking is, we don't do we say do we just count how many people they have on the national team? Do we count how many people they have literally wrestling at the world championships? Do we do like an NCAA scoring breakdown where guys who are 5, 6, 7, someone like Nebraska or Oklahoma State, they got a couple really good guys at the top, say Fixing, Dieringer, or Green Burrows, but they don't have a huge amount of depth. So how do you rank that compared to some of these clubs who have a lot more depth? So that's kind of what I was struggling with. I don't know what you were struggling
Yeah,
with.
I mean, just running through. I actually went back to 2011 and just pulled out all the team members from 2011,
World
world
team
team members
members.
from 2011 to
Oh
2019.
wow.
So I've got the data there, and yeah, for sure, a place like Nebraska's a little skewed because since 2011 they've had 13
A boatload,
13
probably,
world and Olympic team members, but they're from two guys. So
but not nine of
right,
Burrows.
right,
Yeah.
and the other four are James Green. So that kind of skews the data. It looks like, I mean, they're since 2011 they've had the second largest number of world and Olympic team
Yeah.
members.
Who's number one? Ohio,
Ohio
probably.
RTC's got 16 since 2011. But yeah, that data is
Wow.
skewed where the Ohio RTC, they've had multiple guys from what Delagnev, Snyder, uh, Keith
Yeah.
Gavin, Reese Humphreys, Angel Escobedo. Um,
Yeah. Oh
so
yeah.
they've got a pretty wide array of different
Stieber.
Steber from
Yeah.
different team members. So yeah, I mean, you could qualify it a bunch of different ways, but I think if you're really talking about the strength and the depth of the RTCs, I think you almost have to go down to almost to the placers in the open, and then it could go placers, top eight, and then national team members, and then world team members, And I think you do. There is something to international world team members. Case in
Yeah.
point, you look at, and this has been quite a while ago, but if you look at the NLWC, they
Well, that was one of the people I was thinking
they
about a
had
lot.
Franklin Gomez, who was a world silver medalist, and then they had Jaime.
But don't they still have
And
but did they still have
they
Franklin
do,
Gomez?
they do, and they have Jaime
Okay. And
Espinal, who is a
yep.
Olympic silver medalist, who's still
Olympic silver
yeah.
medalist.
So yeah,
Do they have Bexod still?
he's one of those guys that is one of those floater guys, similar to like a Gwizdowski, where
Okay.
he trains primarily with the
Yeah.
NLWC. Bexod does, but he also trains in Boston with his brother with Moose. But then he also
So
goes back home to Uzbekistan to train as well.
Uzbekistan. Yeah, so that makes it really, really difficult when you're doing these. Is like it's not as easy as say the college rankings where hey you list you got listed their 10 guys, and that's their 10 guys. And I was thinking for a few of these teams, let me see, like say for Minnesota Storm. And so Matt, I just said okay, so some of these people they actually list themselves as clubs, even they have an RTC attached. So clubs and RTCs have different rules. So almost all of these clubs also have an RTC, because otherwise you'd be severely limited compared to what other colleges can do. So even though they might say Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, they are also an RTC,
Right.
for example. Minnesota Storm says Minnesota Storm, they're also an RTC.
Same way with Hawkeye Wrestling Club is.
Yep, Hawkeye Wrestling Club. So there's a handful of those. But like Matt, so for example, Minnesota Storm has Anthony Nelson and Gable Stevenson at heavyweight. You can't have two heavyweights in the NCAA rankings. So do I count that? Do we count that as a team depth when we're talking about the
Or
clubs?
you could,
or do we say, well, that's dumb?
I mean, if we're doing it like that, then you take a page out of the NAIA, right? Where and the
multiple entrants.
Multiple entrants. So I think in this situation, you almost have to give credence and credibility if you have, two guys in the top 4, like Minnesota Storm at 125 kg. Yeah, I think you have. I think you have to.
We're allowing multiple entrants.
And then I think one of the other factors is how does the RTC, and we can talk about this on this show. You're not supposed to, really meld the two with the program and the RTC together per NCAA rules. But in this situation, what effect does the RTC have on the program it's associated with and the strength of that program?
Yeah, well, I was also right on top of that question, I was thinking, okay, do we count the college guys or not? And the answer I came up with, like for example, Spencer Lee's ranked 3rd, but I decided not to count Spencer Lee because he hasn't wrestled anything. So I said if they hadn't wrestled in the last year, I wasn't going to count them. But like a Mark Hall just wrestled, and so I counted him on the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club. But say a Vincenzo Joseph or an Anthony Cassar, they have not competed, so I chose not to count them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think that's fair. And then the other thing is we are considering the women, but when I started looking through the women's rankings, really Hawkeye Wrestling Club, I know, and I know, obviously the Badger RTC who I work with, we just got 3 girls to sign with the Badger RTC, and I know the Hawkeyes have a bunch. But when you look across the board, Matt, not a lot of these programs have a lot of depth with females. Most of the females, from what it appears, are training at the Olympic Training Center.
Yeah, I think what we're probably going to see, especially with the performance of the Hawkeye Wrestling Club and the 3 women that they placed on the team this year, I think you're going to see a steep increase in where these women are going to choose to train. I think the bulk of the women, like you said, are probably at the RTC at the Olympic Training Center. But like you said, we've got a number of women. I think the Hawkeye Wrestling Club has 5. How many women does Badger RTC have right now?
We have 3
now.
And
then I think the other bigger one would be North Carolina. I believe they have 2, 3, or 4 women.
2 or 3
training. So I think that we're going to see, that's probably a conversation and for the women, we're not trying to exclude you in this conversation. It's just the sample size of the number of women training on, with college programs or college RTCs. It's really been this
Yeah.
past year where we've seen a significant number of women training with, Division One programs and RTCs. Correct. So I don't think it's a
Yeah.
pertinent
Well, yeah,
piece of
then
it.
and obviously, like Campbellsville, for example, has a college program where Iowa does not have a women's
Right.
program, and so obviously, a lot of the females there are younger. I mean, all three of the girls that Wisconsin has, they're all college age females. They made the choice to change the RTC for one reason or another, but they could also be wrestling for a college, one of the college programs.
Right.
Um, Okay, so let's agree on are we counting depth or not? Do we do what do NCAA scoring type of thing, or do we want to count just the amount of guys on the world team?
No, let's do.
It's
It's
tough. It's
it's it's
tough, isn't
tough.
it?
I almost want to say you almost have to, you know, do it on national team members because you can't really get a good because you can't get a really good indication just off the world team members, right? Um,
No, I think that's too hard. That'd be like saying, well, college programs are only good if they have an NCAA champion, whereas there's a lot of programs that place in the top five without having an NCAA champion in any specific year.
and then do you actually do you
So we'll,
actually
we'll just say overall
yeah, and
depth.
then do you actually I think a piece of the discussion should be the coaching staffs in place around these RTCs too, correct?
Oh, now
Well,
we're going
yeah,
so
that's
deep
that's
now.
getting really, really deep into discussion, but
um, yeah, I mean, so the other thing that I was this now you're gonna get running off on another tangent, Matt. Um, the other thing that I was thinking is obviously we talked about a lot of these are based around college programs, but I really love now Reese Humphrey's doing a great job at NJRTC, and that's really a compilation of both Rutgers and Princeton. And
that's
Matt, I
that's the
was thinking
one
like,
that's the one true regional training center, right?
but why don't other people do this? I was thinking about I was looking at and I know you got to compete in season, but I was looking at, for example, Wolfpack, Tar Heel, and then you also have right down the road you have Duke and Campbellsville. Like, I get that they have to compete against each other during the college season, but it seems to me that it would benefit everybody to pool their money up and have one RTC. And obviously, maybe it trains here on Monday and Wednesday, and here on Tuesday, Thursday, or something like that. Maybe Campbellsville's a little farther away, so maybe they don't get it nearly as often as the
but
other
that
places,
that
right?
actually
But if they pooled,
yeah,
well,
that
go ahead.
actually makes it in the truest sense of the word, a regional training center, right? And makes the most logical sense. But I don't
Yes.
think there's many regions where you have in close proximity 2, 3, or 4 program
Well,
like in the
yeah.
on
The
Tobacco
other one,
Road.
Matt. Well, the other one that actually does it. So NJRTC does it. The other one that actually does it are two other. I believe Penn does it with Penn does Penn and Drexel, I
Yep.
believe. Um, and it does NYRTC. I believe they have Columbia and Hofstra. I could be wrong on that,
Okay.
but that's what I think. And then hey, like the Badge RTC, for example, we have a lot of Division 2 and 3 kids coming up from the local colleges. So, but I mean, like I think NC State and North Carolina and Campbellsville and Duke, they could raise some serious money where each of them individually has a handful of good guys, but they could go compete. Paycheck to paycheck, they could compete and bring some of the best in, and that's a huge value for
Yeah, because I
everybody, I
think
think.
I mean that's the reality with most RTCs is the funding, and it's been
Yes,
well.
that's so
Yeah,
huge,
I
man.
mean it's everything. I mean, if you don't have the
It's
ability
everything
to,
because if you don't have the funding,
you can't
yeah,
bring in the athletes, and if you can't bring in I mean, it's you see how that conversation goes. But um, yeah,
yeah,
I mean, it would make logical sense. Yeah, I was actually talking to Rob Cole yesterday, and that's one of his struggles. Not only is he trying to, he's got a significant amount of funds he's got to raise for the Cornell wrestling program, but then he's also got to raise money for his RTC. And he's like, I don't really have that one big money guy. He's like, I've got to, you know, he's like, I got
Yep.
to pool all these guys together and piecemeal these, packages for this athlete or that athlete. And, he was talking about some specific guys that he
Yep.
was looking to bring in. He's like, but the reality is, he's like, to create a package for just one guy, he's like, I've got get an individual donor, and I've got to, hopefully get
Mm-hmm.
an apparel sponsorship for this guy or that guy. And then,
Yes.
to create a package that actually makes it feasible. But, to your point, if you do what Princeton and Rutgers are doing, pooling resources, all of a sudden, you know, you can spread the wealth a little bit more.
Yeah, I would definitely look into that if I had another close program because yeah, I do realize how difficult it is raising money. I've been part of that at Wisconsin, and we've done a solid job in year one, but getting that ball rolling was it was a challenge. Okay, so let's get into this. I guess we're just gonna go 5 through 1, 1 through 5. Which way you want to go?
Let's go 5 through 1.
5 through 1. Okay. So I am leaning more towards a depth perspective. That's the way I was pretty much looking at this. Um, because when you say like the two that I'm gonna leave off that people are probably gonna kill me for is Nebraska and Oklahoma State. Nebraska literally, I believe they literally only have two athletes. I couldn't find anyone else that trains there. I could be missing somebody. Again, I couldn't find a list of them anywhere. And Oklahoma State, they pretty much only have two people training there, Fix and Derringer. I couldn't find a lot of other people. So like the lack of depth for them, that really hurt their case. Uh, so yeah. So without further ado, number 5, I go to Michigan. And Michigan, I believe, will have 4 or 5 wrestlers at the World Championships this year. Um, Obviously, Adam Kuhn is competing in Greco. He also is very, very highly ranked in freestyle. You have Pantelia, who's ranked high in freestyle. You have both Amins wrestling for San Marino. You have Dave Habit wrestling for Slovenia. You have Stojan Micic wrestling for Serbia. And he actually just beat the world number 1 yesterday. He's in the European final, so he's doing a good job. So with 5 guys wrestling at the world championships, and I get that a lot of them are for other countries, and so I think I could even possibly move these guys higher if these guys were competing within the United
You know
States,
what? Here,
and I knew where to accurately
yeah,
rank them.
here's an interesting point, and I guess we won't. This is a way to maybe qualify the international athletes. And this would be a
Yeah.
conversation for next year. If these guys actually qualify their weight for the Olympics, then it gives their spot, because in the world championships year, if
Oh
if you can
yeah.
if you can represent a country, you can wrestle. But in Olympic years, you actually have to qualify the weight. So I know some people
Yes. Man, qualification spots have went down. I actually just talked to Piles about this. Qualification spots went from 21 to 16. So qualification for the Olympics is going to be significantly tougher than ever
yeah,
before.
so I right now, I mean, it's great that Michigan has 5 guys that are gonna be competing in the world championships this year, but
Yeah.
to validate that, it would mean something if those same guys, those 5 guys actually wrestled in the Olympics, because they would actually have to qualify the weight, and then just by the qualification procedures, they're one of the top 16 guys in the entire world.
Yes. Yeah, I think that adds a lot. Definitely a lot of value. Okay, well that's my number 5. Who do you got at number 5?
Yeah, I mean, that's the one that I had as well. I think we kind of looked at the data a little bit differently. I was looking from a historical standpoint. You were looking more for, you know, in the here and now,
Current.
present day, who's actually doing stuff. Um, so yeah, I would say that Cliff Keen Wrestling Club definitely is right up there.
Are they Cliff Keen Wrestling Club or are they Michigan
Have
RTC?
they
Or are
switched?
they Cliff Keen RTC? I don't know. I don't keep it's
I
hard to
thought
keep
it
up
was a
with.
CK, but different, like, different programs do different things. Like the Hawkeye Wrestling Club is still, that's their regional training center. They more
Yes.
go by the Hawkeye, you know, just like the NLWC doesn't go.
Yes.
I mean, the Pennsylvania RTC is actually UPenn.
Yep.
So
Yeah, yeah. And well, yeah, and they come out of Drexel. Um Okay. You want to lead off with your number 4?
I would actually go. Well, again, my data is kind of skewed because I didn't look through all the numbers you did in the present day. Like I said, I was kind of
Ah,
going more
okay.
historical, but I could probably I think that the main ones are there. I would probably say the Hawkeye Wrestling Club, and this is a little bit
Okay.
skewed because in this situation, you do kind of have to factor in the women. They do have 3 women on the team, which is
Yeah.
significant. They've got roughly
Mhm.
a third of the athletes on the world team are coming from the Hawkeye Wrestling Club. You had Gilman in the finals. Um, Obviously, Spencer Lee is kind of a moot point at this point, but they have a
Yeah.
number of guys.
I don't think you can count
No,
him.
you can't, not at this point. Um, but they
Yeah.
they have a number of guys that are probably not really. Gilman was the only guy on the men's side of things that made the national team, correct?
On the men's side, so from what I could see, they only have 4 athletes on the men's side, um, which is Thomas Gilman, Brandon Sorensen, Corey Clark, and Sam Brooks. That's what I couldn't really find anyone else. I don't know. I don't think there's anybody else, and so I believe Thomas Gilman was the only one of those guys who made the national team. I think Sam Brooks was 1 spot away, but I don't think he made it.
Yeah, I believe he was fourth, correct? Um,
That's what I think.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So that would be my number 4 pick. Do you have a number 4?
Yeah, I do. So I left the Hawkeyes off because they only have 4 athletes and only one of which was on the team. The other one I left off because I talked about leaving Cowboy and Nebraska off, which is again, if you say strictly by world team members, is idiotic, but that's not really how I went about it. The other one I left off is Finger Lakes. Now they have Yanni Dake and Oliver, and then your man Ben Honus. So again, they are very limited in who they have, but who they do have is very,
And
very
they have
good.
some Greco. They have some
Um,
Greco guys as well, right? Last year they had Chavez make the team in Greco, and I think they actually have a full-time Greco coach. I believe he's from
they do?
Iran.
Are you
I'm
sure?
positive he's from
Wow.
Iran. He's
Wow.
a dedicated Greco coach for
Wow.
Cornell's RTC.
Okay. So my number 4 was the Minnesota Storm, and I know they have great funding. And I didn't even count I know they got Greco guys also, Matt. But in the men's freestyle rankings, they have 10 guys. And I thought that was like I just kept seeing the Minnesota Storm, and I'm like, "Holy crap, how many guys do they have in this?" And so, man, they have a lot of funding. They have a lot of athletes training, and like if you're looking again, so I said, are we scoring this from a who made the world team or an NCAA perspective? If you're scoring this from an NCAA perspective, and you had to give guys, points per weight class, they would be hard to beat, Matt, because they have someone at almost every single weight class, and like certain weight classes that we talked about, Anthony Nelson and Gable Stevenson, they have 2 at that weight
They would
class.
actually be that
So
kind of like the Minnesota team that won the NCAA title with 10 All-Americans, but no national
yeah,
champs, right? Their senior
absolutely.
senior
Yes,
program is very similar. They would have on the senior level 10 All-Americans, no world team members, but
yes.
in some ways you could argue they're the best RTC out there from a depth perspective.
They have so much depth. So just to run through who I'm pretty sure they have Ness times 2, Sanders, Nazar, Rao, Farr, Zilmer, Stevenson, Bradley. I mean, that is a lot for an RTC. That's like Matt. When I'm thinking about how much money we have to raise to fund 10 athletes full time, I'm like, holy crap! Like we got a lot of work to do. We're gonna have to start grinding this out, getting some more of these athletes, getting some more donors and getting some more funding because 10 athletes full time that's a serious commitment right there.
Yeah, and I mean, the Minnesota Storm is one of those RTCs that we don't really talk about from a funding
Because
standpoint.
they haven't been putting guys, yeah, they haven't been putting guys on the team. I think that's why they get left out of the discussion. They don't. To what you said, they don't have a lot of number ones.
But I think from a creative financial standpoint, that I think
Oh,
they do a really good job of filling um, cross-functional roles. A lot of these guys, I think, serve different roles within the program. but also
Yeah.
do
I
stuff with the RTC. I think they're the ones that are very creative, like having a videographer for the team or a strength coach or, a director of development that's still competing. I think they do a really good job of getting very creative with the roles and how they fill the roles. They're not, I think primarily a lot of the RTCs, they just have resident athletes, right? And that's all they do. These athletes come in and 100% of their time is dedicated to just training, as opposed to, I think, Minnesota, these guys have roles within the program as well and within the club.
yeah, which is something maybe not everybody has to have. I know Nebraska's really Jordan and James just do their own thing and they don't really coach at all. But I think a lot of these people, their futures are as coaches in some way, shape, or form. And so maybe they wouldn't have to have full-time responsibilities, but for them to have some type of job or something, I think it would be a really good thing.
Which I think is good, and this is a sidebar to the conversation. I know the one, you know, not a gripe, but a complaint of the RTCs just on a national level is it's really kind of depleted the the coaching ranks. When coaches are going out there to look at coaches, a lot of these athletes, the funding for these RTCs is such now that a lot of these athletes are getting paid the equivalent or in the ballpark of what they would be paid to be a college coach. So a lot of these guys are like,
Yes.
why would I want to coach when I can get paid just to train? And so I think it's kind of
Yeah.
depleted the coaching ranks or
The coaching.
um, I know that's one of the downside that's a sidebar, but that has nothing to do with this
Yeah.
conversation. But
Well, I mean, yeah, I agree. Okay, I'll go number three. Um, I think if you look at a historical perspective, they probably would have been number one, but they are slightly down this year, and that's the Ohio RTC. You have Nato McKenna, Stieber just retired, but he was in the rankings. Snyder, Colin Moore, and Miles Martin. I'm not missing anyone, am I?
no, I I
I
I
tried to
I
compile everyone
think
I
that's
thought.
pretty close, and I think they didn't have the performance that they've had historically in the past decade for a variety of reasons. Like you said, Logan retired. Nate Tomasello, he's been kind of injured
Injured,
for the
yeah.
past year and tried to.
Well, man, it's just like anything though. I
McKenna
mean,
didn't
they
wrestle.
were the cream of the
Yeah, McKenna didn't wrestle his best.
y
Miles, had the performance at the Open and the World Trials that
yeah.
we thought he was capable of more, just like McKenna. We wouldn't have thought that McKenna wouldn't even make the trials, right? Or make the
No, I mean, Matt McKenna was in Final X
yeah.
last year. McKenna was wrestling Logan Stieber in Final X last year. I mean, so these guys were wrestling off to make the world championships last year. And now, one is retired and one didn't make it. But that does so I can't just say, well, one result throws out how good they
So
are. That's not what I'm doing here, right? I'm aggregating results, even though I'm saying who do they currently have in their stable. But I am aggregating results. Joey McKenna is really good. I'm not just discounting him because he didn't place this year. That's ridiculous. So, but like I said,
so if
Ohio RTC, I think you look. Wait, hold on. From a historical perspective, they're probably number one. But just like anything, it's cyclical. You go up and down, up and down. And right now they are a little down compared to what they were a few years back. But that doesn't mean they're not going to start, getting some more of these athletes in and becoming as powerful as they once
yeah,
were.
since 2011, the Ohio RTC has put 16 guys on world and Olympic teams. That's pretty astounding. Especially back you want to talk about cyclical things. In 2013, they actually had five guys on the world team,
Oh
which
my,
is
oh
amazing.
my gosh, that's gotta be that's gotta be well, because at that point there was only 8 weight classes
Yep,
that
yep,
year. Because that was the year they bumped by
right.
one. Okay, wow. I mean, yeah, that's so
And
impressive.
they're
Okay,
also one of the
who?
few RTCs on multiple years and three since 2011. They've had 4 years, 4 of those years where they've put multiple guys on the world team, which is very, very, very impressive.
Wow, that's very impressive. Okay, you're not. Who's your number three?
Yeah, I would go with the RTC if we're going just on this year's results. I would
Yeah,
but also you can't discount, the historical data. I would say the Ohio RTC this year is probably that
Mm-hmm.
number 3 program.
Okay. All right. You want to go your number 2 then, or you want to talk about that more?
No. I mean, I it'll be interesting to see how things develop. I mean, this also goes. We talked about it being cyclical, but also it kind of is dependent and contingent upon the Olympic cycle, and what's going on.
Yep.
And so it'll be interesting to see what happens after next year moving forward. But I would think I would put the NLWC in there at number 2. Um, and it,
Who the hell I'm trying to figure out who your number 1's going to be. Okay, keep going.
yeah, I mean, and you could probably make an argument that they could be number 1. And this goes
Uh huh.
historical too. I mean, I think the NLWC has only had 1 year since 2011 where they didn't put someone on the team. The Ohio RTC has put
Yeah.
at least one individual on the team since 2011. The NLWC.
I mean, the one thing, Matt, I know as much as Penn State's dominated the freestyle, I'm sorry, the NCAA scene, they have not made that same type of dominance or transition to the senior level freestyle. And now we're getting a few years ago, you probably would have said, well, it's going to happen. And now you're saying, well, if it is going to happen, when is it going to happen? Because I don't know. I don't know. It's just not. It's like a lot of these guys, Ruth obviously went to fighting. Taylor's long, Zane finally made his first world team, but Nolf looks like, I love Nolf, but how is he going to make a world team? Nickel's going to be stuck behind a couple of these guys. So you're looking like, when is this dominance going to happen?
Yeah, so I think the talk and the discussion, if we look at this decade in its entirety, and Kale took over the program right at the beginning of the decade, right? Actually, just in 2011. So I think that the
Hmm.
talk there, because the NLWC, the first couple of years that Kale was on board, and I was there on staff, and I was actually the head coach of the NLWC at this time. We actually
Hmm.
brought in 10 full-time resident athletes, but all of
Oh
those
my
10,
God. You guys are so
yeah, those
lucky.
10 guys were everywhere but from Penn State, except with the exception of two of the 10 guys were Penn State guys, and the other guys we brought in from the outside. And the thought was that after 3 or 4 years of recruiting, that the NLWC would be inhabited by all Penn State guys, and that kind of has turned out
Yeah.
to be the case. I know they have some Greco guys there, 1 or 2 other guys outside of Penn State, but you know, the
Yep.
vision of what that program would be was that once you get a full recruiting cycle in, and that's talking about 5 years into Kale's tenure, that the NLWC would be inhabited by Penn State guys, which it does. What it hasn't translated into is multiple guys from those title runs
Yes.
making world teams. I think they've got a lot of guys that have been close,
Yeah.
but we haven't seen the translation then that we thought we would have had. Like I think in 2011 the NLWC actually had 5 guys in the world championships, 3 of which were on the US team, and then they had the 2 athletes from Puerto Rico.
Which year did you just say?
20, that was
2015?
2011 that they had
2011. Oh, you
three
went that far
guys
back.
on the US
Okay.
team, 2 guys that wrestled internationally for Puerto Rico. But then, after that, they've had guys consistently on the team, but just probably not the level that we thought we would.
Yeah. Okay. Well, they're actually my number 1. So I'll talk more about them in a second. So I gotta yawn. I'm stretching. My bad. That's bad. Makes for bad podcast. My number 2 is the New Jersey RTC. I think they have a huge amount of depth. So let me list all their people. That is again who I believe they have: Graf, Downey, Ashnall, Jackson, Kolodzik, Brookie, and I was up in the air whether to count Soriano or not, because Soriano, he did wrestle a freestyle match
He
this
did.
year, so he meets my criteria, although he didn't wrestle in a tournament. I said they wrestled the last year, and he technically he did, although it was a one-off. But he beat Joe Colon, who was a world medalist. and obviously beat Dayton Fix, who's our world team member. And so, when he decided not to wrestle in the trials, I was pissed about it. I thought it was so annoying. Um, yeah. So I got, they got Graff and Downey on the world team, which is fantastic. Ashnault was in the finals of the trials against James Green. Nick Soriano, we talked about him, and then they have some extra depth. So they have both the guys on the high end, and they also have a handful of guys. And I want to say they have a few more athletes, but I can, dude, NJRTC. If you guys got a website, I can't find it. I typed in all kinds of shit on Google, and I can't find their website, Matt. So if they have more, they could be a little deeper than that even, and I just don't know about it. But I found 8 guys, and they have 2 guys on the world team, another guy in the trials finals, and then another guy, Nick Soriano, who's beaten a world medalist in the last year.
Yeah, I mean that's actually my number one. You were wondering who my number one?
Really?
Yeah, that's actually my number one.
Wow.
For those reasons that you just said. I mean, you can't really, with the New Jersey RTC, look at historically what they've been, because they've really just consolidated their RTC within the last couple of years and really started investing a lot of resources. And what they've done, because Reese has been there, what, 2, or is this his 3rd year?
I believe 2 years, yeah.
So in the 2 years that he's taken over the New Jersey RTC, what they've been able to do and the impact and the number of guys that they put on the team, it's really impressive. So for those reasons, and for the reasons that you explained, that they would be my number one.
Yeah. Okay. So why I put Penn State above them, and I can definitely see your argument, is obviously Taylor's not on the team this year, but I think we would all agree that he's kind of the guy, even though he's injured. You have Nickel, Nolf, Zane, all really challenging to make the team. You have Mark Hall not that far off this year. And then, from the international perspective, you had Gomez. I didn't know if Espinal was still there. You had Bexad, who's had a world medal previously. Obviously, Gomez has had a world medal previously. And then did they? I want to say they also had some Japanese guys.
I
there.
don't know. I
So they
think
just have
they had some, and you actually, what you could make an argument for is Gwizdowski as well. If you, because
you could
I
argue
know
him.
Gwiz trains up in State College a lot, and if the last several years in his corner, Casey Cunningham has been in his corner as well as one of the NC State coaches, but he's probably maybe a utility guy, maybe a guy you claim off waivers, right? to compete for you. But I mean, you could say that Gwiz is in some ways an NLWC athlete. I don't want to take away from NC State and the Wolfpack and what they're doing, because that is his home base. But he's one of those guys where you could probably have that conversation. Jaden Cox now is firmly entrenched at the out in Colorado Springs. So he doesn't really have a designation about who he wrestles for, but I guess you could in some ways, like, say that the NLWC, based on that criteria, it's an interesting discussion.
It's an interesting conversation. I haven't heard anyone have that conversation, so I think it was interesting for us to have it. And Matt, I gotta run to go do some training. I know you wanted to ask me a few questions about the fight. And for those of you guys who live under a rock, I have a fight here in what is it? 10
coming
11,
up.
11 days, I believe.
And I know we don't talk about this much. This is a wrestling podcast, but you're one of the hosts of the show. And you've also got this big event coming up. So I know a lot of people are interested, and, I'm interested. How are you feeling? Things are, you just got back from LA, right?
Everything's great. Yeah, I had to push the show a day because I didn't get back. I didn't get in bed till 2:45-ish yesterday. It's 2 nights ago. 2 nights ago, I was in LA for that press opportunity. My opponent declined to show up. Now, listen, contrary to what popular idiots on Twitter are saying, it is mandatory within your contract to show up for designated media events. So I don't know if he's getting fined or it's a slap on the wrist. I don't know.
I mean, Ben, that just blows my mind.
I agreed to do my job. I'm gonna do my job.
And that just blows my mind. I mean, you guys are 2 professional athletes, two two fighters who are the best in the world or up there, in the top 5 in the world. How do you not
Yep.
show up for your professional obligation?
Well, that's twice now he did it. So apparently last time they told me he had a really good excuse. Um, and I said, "Well, that's dumb." And then this time I actually didn't even hear about it till like the day of. Someone said, "I heard he's not coming." I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't really affect me. I'm here to talk about myself, my fight. If he doesn't want to promote himself, that's fine. I'll just do it. I'll do my own
But I
thing.
mean,
And
to me, there
so,
just seems to be
I
like,
think in some way he thinks it's a mind game or it's gonna positively impact him. I don't really know what he's thinking. I don't really care. I'm gonna go in there and do what I have to do. I'm gonna execute. I'm just better than him, and I think it's as simple as that.
yeah. So I mean, number one, I mean, I always think if you're trying to play games, you got some issues. If you got to play games leading up to a fight, and are trying
Yeah.
and are
Well, if you think games are gonna work, it's because games work on you.
right.
But games don't work on me, so why I wouldn't bother trying to play them, and that's where he's at. So, I think there are some significant mental weaknesses on his part, and that's kind of what's leading him to do these things. But yeah, either way, and the other big news on my behalf was that I was calling it. I didn't know this was gonna happen, but I was calling it. But Colby Covington, who was supposed to get the next shot against Marty Usman, he got booked against Robbie Lawler in August. So that kind of clears my way. If I go ahead and execute on what I want to execute on in 11 days, that I will probably be able to, or it looks as though I'll be able to position myself for a title shot at some point later this year.
And I think, I listened to some of your interviews out in LA. And that's the one thing that people don't really understand. The fight game is kind of predicated on, who's front of mind, right? Not necessarily who's
Oh
beat
yeah,
who. And I think that's something that you explained that I thought was very interesting, that a lot of people, they're like, well, Covington, he had the interim belt and therefore he deserves, but
yeah,
he's kind of like, he passed on a couple fights and he did some certain things. And,
yep,
you've been doing your job and you've been out there and taking care of your professional responsibilities. You're out there, you're promoting things. People are attracted to what you're saying and what you're doing in the ring, and therefore you should be rewarded for it. And I think that's part of
yep.
your professional responsibilities. It's not just predicated on the results of what you do in the ring. It's how you carry things and how you build momentum outside of the ring, and that's part of the game.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And man, especially if you're not fighting for a year plus, people are gonna forget about you. They're just not, and they're not gonna care. And that's kind of exactly what happened here. So yeah, I mean that's huge news. So now all I have to do, I have to go do what I like to do. I have to go fight someone, and I have to execute on my strategy. And I think it's a win, and then a title shot for me. So I did very exciting times for myself. And I actually have to go do some training right now. So that's gonna wrap it for this
Hey,
show,
I
Matt.
think we
I think
wanted
I
to
want to try to.
do
I want to get on next week.
okay. Well,
Oh, we're gonna do a
yeah, we're
giveaway.
gonna do a
W-
giveaway. I don't know if you
We're
want to talk about it.
we're
It's
gonna
it's your fight. It's your gig, so I'll give the platform over to you.
yeah, yeah, we're gonna do a giveaway for some T-shirts and some signed posters. We're gonna announce that via social media. So just well, if you listen this long, you're a very loyal listener, and we appreciate you. But we'll be doing the giveaways via social media. So pay attention for
Cool.
those. Perfect. All right, guys, that's a wrap.
All right, man. We'll see you.